Good afternoon and welcome to the Senate Committee on Government Operations Committee meeting of Tuesday, May 13th. Imagine almost halfway through the month of May. We're going to deal with H397. This is the miscellaneous amendments to the statutes governing emergency management and flood response. We're happy to have from Joint Fiscal Office, Chris Rube, who can only stay with us for about half an hour, or actually 28 minutes from now. So please join us. And this is a strike all that we've been working on seemingly for weeks and weeks and weeks. But hopefully, if we get to a point, I'm hoping tomorrow, to be able to vote this out, it will probably take a stop across the hall. And at that point, depending on where they are with the education bill, it probably won't come out until next week for a report on the floor. I'm assuming that Senate Finance will have other things to do. So you should have received from Chris email with joint fiscal bulletins, but I think he's going to share that with us. And I'll post it. Yeah. Welcome.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. For the record, Chris from Joint Fiscal. I apologize to the committee that I'm booked at two elsewhere. So I will try to make the most of our 27 remaining minutes. And there should be two resources that will be posted on the committee page today. One is just a really short slide deck that I'm going to go through, and another that you can peruse at your leisure if you really want to dive into the weeds of like local option taxes and pilot funds, is an issue brief that my colleague Ted Barnett put together earlier this session. Yep. So I followed a little bit of your discussion last week, and I came in to really talk about some of the ins and outs of local option taxes and the proposal that was in the bill that came over from the House to shift the allocation of revenue from 70-30 to 75-25. So just as a real quick refresher on local option taxes, because I know this is a subject that you all might not deal with quite as frequently as some of the other committees do, is state law grants towns in Vermont the authority to levy an additional 1% tax on sales, meals and alcohol, and order rooms. And if you want to skip ahead to the very, very end of the slide deck, there's a chart that shows you what town levies which local option taxes and by which effective dates. So I did just want to flag that if you're from Burlington or Rutland City, you're familiar with the fact that there are some local taxes that are similar to the local option taxes there, but we're not talking about those. We're just talking about the local option tax that the state gives municipalities the authority to levy on these things. So the local option tax, it's important that to know that this is collected and administered by state government, by the tax department. State law apportions the revenue 70% to the town that levies the tax and 30% to the pilot special fund. The one little parenthetical exception there is the local option tax on jet fuel that goes to the T fund instead of the pilot fund due to FAA regulations. That money is used for aviation related purposes. And as a token of everyone's appreciation of the tax department for all the hard work they put into administering this, they receive $5.96 per return. And that money comes out of the pool of money that would otherwise be available to the locals or the pilot fund. So something to keep in mind is that, I've heard this described a lot of different ways. So like, I'm not wading into any sort of policy debate. I'm just going very narrowly on like what this tax is and who does what here. That, the local part is that local voters have to approve the local option tax. But I just want to be really clear that the tax is based on the commercial activity that occurs within a town. It's not based on whether you live in the town or own property in the town. So especially when you look at the fact that a lot of ski resort type towns have these taxes, or regional shopping destinations have these taxes in place, it doesn't mean that the people in the town are necessarily the ones exclusively paying this. Anybody who's doing commercial activity in these towns is paying. And you all made a pretty significant legislative change last year where, I believe this is in the miscellaneous tax bill. You have now given all towns the authority to implement a local option tax without a charter change as long as the voters approve. There is a provision that allows the tax department to limit the number of new ones at 5 per calendar year if it becomes administratively burdensome to do, like a huge flood of them all at once. But in the past, you might have remembered that the calendar would often be full of charter amendments for the legislature to approve local option taxes. And this is why you haven't seen any of that on the calendar this year. So let's just talk a little bit about the pilot special fund. The mains, I think you all know that pilot stands for payment in lieu of taxes. The main funding source for the state's pilot payments to municipalities is that 30% share of the local option tax revenue. So that money goes to the pilot special fund and is then used to make pilot payments to towns for state-owned property, prisons, and UVM. There's a cap in place in statute that caps the UVM pilot at $750,000 a year. It's also really important to know and just be mindful of that you all, the legislature, are the ones that determine the allowable uses and expenditures from the pilot fund. So you all create the statute that sets forth the allowable uses, you appropriate the dollars out. So this is really within the legislature's bailiwick. My colleague Ted, who is not here today, really is our expert on this subject and can give you an enormously tedious walkthrough of how the pipelines are calculated. But it's by a formula that typically takes into account the placement value of state properties. And then you all, through the budget, have to appropriate the money to fully fund the pilot. But if the amount you appropriate is insufficient to fully fund the formula pilot payments, the payments are prorated. So everybody would get a little bit less than they otherwise would. And something that's really important to know is FY24 was actually the first year that pilot payments to towns were fully funded at the formula amounts. And in all those prior years, the payments have been prorated. FY25, they're fully funded to the current year, and the 26 budget that you all just voted on today fully funds them again as well. So here's this little map that shows you that on the left, you'll see the towns. This is all from the tax department's website. They have a lot of great resources about this tax on their website. You'll see a map of the towns that have the different local option taxes. But also you'll see here, I put over on the right, a map of the pilot payments to towns. And you'll see that there's not always perfect overlap. The towns with the local option taxes tend to be areas that get a lot of visitor traffic. They might be regional shopping destinations. A lot of the towns in Chittenden County have them. And whereas the municipalities that receive the pilot payments through the pilot special fund are spread all over the place. And you'll see the Ted pulled together sort of a list by municipality of who gets the most from all the various pilot payments that are out there. And it's not a real surprise. You'll see they're the places that have a lot of state government buildings, or, Burlington's got that UVM piece. Some of the municipalities that have prisons are higher on the list as well. But it's important to know also that a lot of pilot payments go out for pretty small amounts of money for, less than $25,000, where, there might be a few state parcels here or there. So here's where we've been in recent history. I think those of you who have been around know that after the pandemic, we've seen some interesting changes in our consumption tax. We've seen a huge surge in consumption tax collections. And that really started, we sort of hit the pandemic bottom, if you will, in FY21, and things have grown ever since then. And you've seen that in the most recent years, the revenues that have come into the pilot fund have been growing more rapidly than the payments out for the pilot payments. As a result of that, by FY24, which is the most recently closed fiscal year, the fund had an ending balance of about $10.3 million. And as the revenues have gone up, the as I mentioned, has been able to fully fund the pilot payments. So you can see that proration in the bottom there in the prior years when things were not fully funded. And then at 2024 and then beyond, we are at 100%.
Is it,
So anyway,
thank you, Chair Comer. So is it fair to say on this last bar graph right here that it's like the green is the delta, like the increase amount to the blue is the delta between the revenue and the expense?
yeah,
Is that-
the cumulative delta.
Okay, thank you. So because that's widening, which is kind of
Right,
interesting.
exactly. And most of that widening happened in a few recent years after the pandemic.
This isn't in our chart. I don't see it anyway. I mean, it's not in our paper, so
It's on
It's on,
his page, on his computer. here.
I know, but it's not on our paper, which is why I need to see what green, red and blue are. So the ending balance is blue and the red is
it's
expense.
on page 6 of the handout. You're looking at the wrong handout, Senator.
Oh,
You're looking at,
how unusual. I
you're looking at the
couldn't
issue
find
brief or not.
Oh, this was.
Oh, I handout we made. Print size. Sorry.
Okay, thank you. I am on the wrong hand because I was looking for it and I couldn't find it.
But yeah, you're reading it correctly, Senator. When you go back in the earlier years on the chart, you're seeing that ending balance much lower. You're also seeing, the difference between the revenue and expenses isn't really that big. But consumption taxes have been overperforming expectations in recent years. So why does this happen? Well, there's two big things happening. The pandemic era, changes in spending habits. There has been a lot of spending on durable goods and things that are subject to sales tax after the pandemic. There was some pent up demand. In the pandemic, people were spending a little less on services because didn't go out to eat and didn't travel quite as much, or spent some money on things that were subject to the sales tax. Once things opened up, people started traveling again. Then you started seeing meals and rooms get stronger and everything else. Obviously, those of you who have been around tax policy for a while know something called the Wayfair decision that happened a few years back. That state has approved state ability to collect sales tax from online transactions. So in the past, if you had a local option tax in your town but no real retail, the potential to raise money through that wasn't real
It was
high.
modest.
Right, and now with online sales, you might not have it downtown or a lot of like brick and mortar type retail, but if you're buying things online and it's being delivered to a town, an address in the town that has a local option tax, that gets picked up. There are lots of administrative complexities that our friends at the tax department can walk you through about how our zip codes and municipal boundaries don't align, but that's a whole other topic. The other big driver of the higher revenue collections has also been just there's more towns with local option taxes. So that chart at the bottom there will show you the number that have grown over time.
It's how many now? Total,
There is a chart at the very, very end.
but not all of this.
There's the slides that I will get to that shows you the 29 towns with one on sales, 33 on meals, and 36 on rooms.
Right. And some of us have everything.
So I think this is the slide that probably you're all most
yes.
interested in. The budget that you all passed this morning in the Senate appropriates just over $14.5 million from the pilot special fund. So that's the $12.2 million for the general pilot. There's extra appropriations for pilots for certain correctional facilities. That's another $192,000. There are two appropriations in the one-time category. One is $1 million for the municipal grand list stabilization program that is also in the bill that you all are looking at. And that would fund, roughly 2 years of the first 2 years of that program. And then in this year, $1.15 million was shifted off of the transportation fund and over to the pilot fund in a line item for town highway non-federal disasters. So the theme here among all of these is that the pilot fund is appropriated for funds that help municipalities.
Right, but not specifically the municipalities race.
Correct. The analysis at the bottom here will show you. So these were updated. So Ted's out. I've dusted off his model. His model captured estimates for all of the towns that had approved local option taxes in 2025, except we didn't have Ludlow in the mix.
Mm.
I actually think it's kind of okay we didn't have Ludlow in the mix for a few reasons. I think ballpark, we think steady state based on some news articles we saw, you're talking roughly 300,000, I think, of additional revenue would come into the pilot fund every year for that. But the data set we were using to estimate is FY24 data. And those of you who remember what was going on earlier in FY24, the summer of 2023, that might not be a great base year for
That
Ludlow,
was tough for.
given things that were going on in Ludlow.
Actually the worst.
And
Yeah.
I also, given the realities of where we are right now in the economy and what's going on beyond the walls of this building, I think we should be pretty cautious about forward-looking projections on consumption tax revenue pending some better data. So, there's lags with all of this. And like the tax data we get in the beginning of May is based on commercial activity that occurred in March. So anything that might be going on in the economy relative to consumer behavior isn't showing up in the data very much yet, but it could in the next few months. So in my sort of back of the envelope, let's do a preliminary ballpark, see where we're at. The exclusion of Ludlow due to sort of the weird funky data in FY24 and the fact that we might see some declines in consumption taxes sort of wash each other out for the sake of discussion, I think. I also just didn't want to break Ted's model by making it overly complicated. We're very proprietary about our spreadsheets. So when you let somebody else in and start messing with the formulas, you never know if the damage can ever be repaired. But the little chart here just gives you some back of the envelope that based on the towns that approved ones, we think, there's roughly 59.2 million in FY26 of total local option revenue. The current law 70% would have, 16.
So sorry, 59 million was what the,
Yeah, of total local option tax revenue. So, you
okay, so I can't read that. So it's in the blue and gray box,
yes.
right? So. Parts, can't read.
Well, they're all blue.
So, the first obligation is to do payment in lieu of tax.
Mhm.
And then what we're talking about is what's left over, right?
So no, what we're talking about here is the total amount of money coming in that would then be available for
59.
everything. So yeah, the total amount would be 59. So once you take the cut that tax gets from the $5.96 per return fee, that's that 3.13 million. The rest of that gets divvied up, 70-30. And under current law with the 70% allocation at the bottom, that means we'd have about $16.8 million in the pilot special fund. Again, in the FY26 budget, there's $14.5 million appropriated out of the fund. The bill before you proposes to shift this allocation from 70-30 to 75-25. That would leave 14 million in the pilot fund, which, when you consider the fact that the town highway non-federal disasters might not be an ongoing arrangement moving forward. It depends what you all do next year. The municipal grand list stabilization program might not always be recurring at $1 million. It really depends on the uptick in flood abated flood prone properties that are bought out and the pacing of spending that money down. But that $1 million represents more than 1 year of demand on that program. We think that by shifting to 75-25, you'll still have the cash flow moving forward to fully fund the obligations that we expect. If you move to 80-20, at $11.2 million coming into the pilot fund, you create a structural deficit moving forward. So you would be eating into whatever positive balance is in the special fund. And then somebody's going to have a conversation at some point about what gives if the money, if there's no longer enough money in the fund to fully fund everything. So we've presented these numbers to the other body. I think that informed their discussion at landing at 75. Because we felt that based on the current number of towns who have local option taxes and where we are currently at with revenues being generated and what we think the pilots have been running at FY26, we think moving to 75, you'll still be able to cover your bases, but you're going to be spending more than you're bringing into the pilot fund if you move to 80-20 right now.
Senator White.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I appreciate this. I think I've been the most vocal advocate for moving to an 80-20 split. This is probably the most well-explained argument against why we should do it and the most factual, so I appreciate it. I guess I'm missing, do you have a chart to kind of show that? Because I guess what I don't understand is I thought we were gaining like a bunch more municipalities.
Yeah, that's factored.
So that is factored
Yeah,
in.
that's factored in.
Except for Ludlow,
Except for
Except for
Ludlow,
Ludlow.
but neither is the.
which we represent.
Right, and so, Ludlow could be a couple 100,000 more going into that, pilot fund.
We've got
So can you just explain to me, so the total amount we need for the pilot fund every year is?
It's going to vary year to
It
year
varies.
based on the appropriations of the legislature. But I mean, just for the general pilot payments and the correctional facility pilot, you're over $12 million just in those recurring costs.
Okay,
Plus whatever might come down the pike for continuing to fund the municipal grand list stabilization program. Because that $1 million is not going to fund the full 10 years of that program. That's going to fund maybe the first 2. So some additional funds are going to be needed in the future. But moving to 75-25, you have 14 million coming into the pilot fund, which covers the first 2 bullet points that I don't have in red at the top. But if you move to 80-20, $11.2 million does not fully fund the pilot payments that the state owes to towns.
yeah, I understand how you're getting there, but I thought the 2 things we had in red were one time, or are those?
They're one-time appropriations in the budget, but it doesn't mean they're going to be one-time obligations that they're going to need funding in future years.
Until we fix your T fund,
Well, no, can I
it's
do
only
that?
gonna grow.
Well,
Okay,
that could be a one-time arrangement. It might not be. The
Right.
language in the budget says whatever's left over at the end of 26 goes back to the pilot fund. Because we don't always spend down that full B917 appropriation. It's a placeholder based on if something happens during the year, then VTrans has appropriations authority to help towns out for disasters that don't meet the thresholds for a federal disaster.
okay, and so if I understand correctly, that last one at least is like an ongoing bottom of the line thing that we tend to do. Is what you're saying. So the town highway non-federal disaster thing will continue onwards.
I'm saying the opposite. I'm saying this is the first year that we funded that out of the pilot fund. It's
Oh.
typically been funded out of the T fund.
Yeah, okay.
But the language says that if it's not used in FY 26, whatever appropriation authority reverts to the pilot fund. It's not like $1 million, 1.15 million was transferred from out of the pilot fund into the T fund where it stays there. The legislature in the future could continue this arrangement. It's just the way it's crafted in the budget that you all voted on earlier is that it would be a one-time arrangement. And the municipal grand list stabilization program, that is a one-time appropriation in the budget that will likely fund the first 2 years of the program, but you'll then need to continue funding it as you go.
Okay, so that's really helpful because I think what I'm trying to get at is that it feels like we could get much closer to being sustainable and not having a structural deficit with the 80-20 if we weren't using one-time funds that we were taking out.
You're
It gets closer to that.
11.2 is still not enough to fund the pilot payments.
Which are
Where's the
over
total?
30.
So these
So the
all-
12.2 plus 192, those are the pilot payments. So you need over $12 million a year of revenue in order to fund.
To pay pilot.
And we end up with 11.2 if we
Correct.
do the 80-20 for
Correct.
this year.
Correct. So you create a structural deficit.
But if we moved it and we made it 80-20 in a subsequent year rather than next year, and we weren't having those one-time payments, we could potentially not see that structural deficit. Is that?
I mean, my crystal ball is broken and these are taxes that are very economically sensitive. So as a nonpartisan fiscal analyst for the legislative branch who doesn't weigh in on policy, I would generally caution people from counting their chickens before they hatch and sort of follow the numbers when they materialize. But yes, if revenues continue to be stronger in the future, there would be the possibility to further adjust the allocation without creating a structural deficit once the numbers
Thank
Sure.
you. That's kind of the bottom line point I'm trying to get to with asking Chris these questions is because I think eventually, if we can, we should try to get to an 80-20 split. But I think I'm ultimately pretty reasonably convinced that a structural deficit is not the direction we want to go. So I'm wondering, maybe just put a flag in it if we could look at, because this list is going to grow. I do think there's a conversation to be had that maybe in the future, our intent is to get closer to that and ideally not use the pilot, not use this funds as like a one-time jettison.
For other town related needs,
Yes.
like.
So that's why-
The highway.
Yeah, which the transportation budget shouldn't be,
Well, if we,
I wouldn't even get into that. But
It's
there you go. That's all I had to say.
Senator Clark.
so maybe predicated on the fact that we create a sustainable T fund.
Hallelujah.
We also heard
Oh.
testimony last week from the town manager of Brattleboro, who was advocating for using 100% of the pilot to reimburse towns who were under the gun with respect to homeless populations.
Right.
And this would seem to argue against that, assuming there are, I think he said, at least half a dozen to 8, maybe 10 communities that would be in that same position. And so every town that joins in, you reduce the pilot by that amount. So I think at this point, 75-25 is probably
Yeah, and
where we're gonna go.
And I do just want to add that when I'm talking about structural deficit, I just want to add a little more color to that. What I'm talking about is on an ongoing basis. Revenues would not be sufficient to cover ongoing expenditures. I'm not commenting on the fact that there happens to be a positive balance in the fund, which obviously would get eaten into if you create a mismatch between your ongoing revenues and expenses.
Senator Clark.
So my other question before we're teasing her about the T-bill, is I guess I just don't see anywhere here what it actually costs tax to administer this program.
Yeah, they receive a $5.96 per return fee. And I would defer to our friends at the tax department to.
Okay, we don't actually know the full cost of what it really costs them. I know what they get. I just want to know what it really costs them to administer it.
Yeah, I would defer to our colleagues at tax.
Look, they're on the agenda.
Any other questions for Chris? Because he does have to
Go in 1 minute.
go. Yes, Senator Webb.
I have two just final questions, and I know that Ted's kind of the person on this, but my first question is, this doesn't take into account the future of other towns joining who have
Correct.
not already done this.
Correct. We cannot predict that.
That totally fair. I just want to put that out there. But is there a way to predict that? Like, is there a way that we could look at that in the
Not
future?
in a way, not in a way that I'm comfortable.
Or like if there was a way to say, if we saw the revenue of, like, how much revenue, I guess maybe the question is, how much revenue would need to be raised
To cover.
to switch to an 80-20? Like, what would the amount of revenue need to be to make it to that?
I mean, if that's the only thing you intend to fund out of the pilot fund, and I don't think there's consensus among the
Sure.
legislature about that,
Yeah.
you would need, somewhere between 12 and 13 million based on where we currently are.
Current,
Based on where we currently are.
the growth of this
Okay, so
grand list of tax.
And it's a very complex, and I just want to reiterate that there's a lot of opinions on this issue and not a ton of consensus, because I've also heard colleagues in the other committees and in the other body argue that we should revisit the calculation of pilot payments.
Right.
So
Wow.
there are lots of discussions and lots of layers to this issue.
Okay, and then my second question is, all of that looks at the towns who are doing what they are doing now with meals rooms or however the breakout is. But not all of those towns have the full gamut of
Right.
what that is or have candidates. One
Right.
second,
No, we just had the map up of that.
It's at the very, very end, yeah.
do you know is there ever a way to look at what the difference is for those? You had the great chart that listed out all of those. Is there a financial number that backs what the difference would be for those towns
I mean,
if they
there-
expanded?
You can go on the tax department website and actually see the meals and rooms and sales collections by town. It's just the last full fiscal year of data was FY24. So like you can go and see like, all right, and Fuels Gore, how much sales tax, meals, rooms and alcohol were paid from those towns, assuming they had more than 10 filers and
Okay.
the data is not suppressed.
Okay, yeah, I think the reason I asked that question is because in Hartford, for example, we don't have it on cannabis. Because of the way.
Nobody has a local
does.
option tax.
Yeah, nobody.
That's a different.
Well, I saw the whole thing was that you could am I wrong? Wow, I thought you could expand it to cover.
So
Sales and use.
they get it on the sales and use
Yeah.
tax piece.
Okay.
Oh, so you do, yeah.
Oh,
But can you do it just on, you can't do it just.
You can't do it just-
Yeah,
but
it's to be every.
Yeah, so that's where we're at, is we don't have it on everything. We have it on like meals and rooms, but not on sales. So we lost out on the cannabis revenue that
Well,
could
I
have
think
been.
Hartford just adopt one on sales, didn't they?
Hartford's got it on sales.
Yeah.
We may have just,
I don't think it's implemented yet, but.
oh, maybe we did vote for it. I don't remember. I voted for something, but anyway, that's my point, is not every town does it on the full gamut of their ability.
The last
And it
chart
sounds like you've
shows you. There's a few that only do it on the rooms.
Yeah. So
Elmore only does it on rooms. Who knew?
second
I think
home.
South Carolina does it on rooms too.
It goes in effect on July 1st.
So clarify that, because I wasn't clear on cannabis. So sales includes all sales, even, interesting.
I would defer to my colleagues at the tax department on that.
So a 1% local option tax can be adopted on all sales.
Yeah,
Or
Woodstock.
Sales tax
We're
are applied
everything.
to,
Yeah.
right? So any cannabis that's sold, the sales tax also. applies
Okay,
to
good, so
that,
it doesn't differentiate. I had thought it had.
Unless you're a weird town like mine.
Yeah, what you can't do is single house cannabis and only.
Yeah, no, I had thought.
The way you can with rooms and meal,
Gotcha.
or rooms or meals.
Okay, thank you, Chris.
Thank you all.
Appreciate you coming in.
Yeah, July 1st it goes.
Cool.
So I would just again emphasize, one of the points that Chris made was there's lag time involved here. And for that reason, and the other reasons we've been experiencing as we walk through the bill, my feeling is that we should step carefully and proceed thoughtfully with what we're doing. And I think we will with the 75-25. And future, who can predict that? If 150 towns decide they're going to do it, guess what? We'll have a lot more revenue, but we have maybe an eighth of that or a ninth of that right now that are doing it. So, okay. Eventually I would like to walk through what is now draft 2.1 of the bill, but let's have Andrew Stein come up from the Department of Taxes to provide testimony on the bill and anything that we need to know before we pass this out.
Sounds good. Andrew Stein, Chief Operating Officer of Taxes. I'm really here to answer any questions.
Okay. Senator Clarkson appears to have a question.
What is your actual cost of administering the pilot?
So that's a good question. So it's not really administering. So administering pilot is not very costly for us. I don't have that broken out, but the revenues that we get are from administering local option taxes, and that's very costly for us. We have a range
Well, that's
of.
what I meant. I mean, that's
Yeah.
what we're sharing. So that's what I meant.
Yeah, so I don't have our budget for next year in front of me. Right now, I can tell you this year, so local option tax fee revenues go to two places. One is the commercial appraisal and litigation assistance program that the legislature created 2 to 3 years ago. And that helps municipalities pay for appraisal work of highly valuable, unique, properties, mines or specialized resorts, those kind of places that require specialization that municipalities often don't have. And we heard from municipalities in our property valuation and review division that they wanted better resources in those spaces. And then when you have a closed circuit system like our property tax system, when your most valuable properties aren't being assessed adequately, it's falling on homeowners primarily to pick up the bill. So that is something that the legislature and the governor signed off on a couple of years ago. So that comes out of that money. And then the remaining, so the appropriation for this year is about 2.2 million. So 800,000 of that goes to CALIP, as we affectionately call it,
Commercial appraisal.
and litigation assistance program. I think in statute, it's actually the state appraisal and litigation assistance program, but it applies to commercial properties. And then the remaining amount, so around 1.2 million, is what we estimated it would cost us to administer local option taxes this year.
Is that $5 and whatever cents, 39, whatever it is,
596.
been pretty constant?
Yeah, it's been very constant. There was a time when it was more, there was like a sweet spot when we shifted into our VTAX system and when there were about half as many local option tax towns and things weren't as complicated. You didn't have. So for example, if you have a local option tax, one type of local option tax in like Rutland City versus Rutland Town or St. Albans City versus St. Albans Town, things get very complicated because they share zip codes. And so we have to work with the largest retailers in the country need to follow these laws, right? And so to get compliance from these very large retailers, we create boundary files with the Vermont Center for Geographic Information. We do a lot of compliance work.
Senator Biehovsky.
As someone who lives in Essex Town versus Essex Junction,
Sure,
I'm
perfect example.
familiar with this. What happens if there isn't compliance, or is there any way for the taxpayer who lives in the non-LOT area to sort of recoup
Yes.
on some?
Yeah, there is an avenue to do that.
Okay.
I can send, if you want, I can send the link.
That would be really helpful, actually, because this is something that people reach out and complain to me about in Essex somewhat frequently.
Really?
Yeah.
Yeah, because
It's been a
the
challenge,
city has a local option tax and the town does not. And so when people order from like an online retailer, a lot of times we're happy because we have the same zip code.
Oh.
The town ends up paying members of the town end up paying a local option tax that they actually shouldn't be paying.
Yeah.
Oh,
Rutland City
like weirdly geo.
claims of-
Yeah.
And it's a challenge. And it's especially a challenge with, it's a challenge with local retailers, but it's especially a challenge with large out-of-state retailers that are trying to get things right between these different towns and cities.
Yeah, Wayfair is,
Senator Clarkson.
Wayfair has complicated it, but also added so fast.
Brought so much money
It's just.
and the ed funds.
So just remind me, because I remember in Ways and Means, we reduced the cost. That's what we were paying taxes was for over $9 down to $5.96. I remember doing that in Ways and Means. The question I have for you is what I've forgotten is what's included in per return. They're like sent to you in batches. Is that per return? What's return?
Oh, yeah.
Per
So the way that it works is, and it's always been coded this way in this system and the former system, it's not exact, it's per return, but it's per local option tax,
Per type?
per type. So like if you, for example, if a very large retailer, this happens primarily with online business, right? If you're a local brick and mortar shop, or say you have two shops, I'll use an example. Say it's Vermont business and they have two locations that they're filing local option taxes for. We collect that fee on those two locations. We don't have a way of separating, like prorating that fee across
So the
locations.
per return is from the retailer, not
Yes.
from the town submitting it.
That's right. Yeah, we collect for the town and then submit to the towns. And so we can use our compliance division, for example, to do work in that space. So when we're going in and doing compliance work around meals and rooms and sales and use, we're also doing work on local option taxes. So when we bring taxpayers into compliance in that space, it benefits the municipalities. And so the $5.96 is paid. It comes in terms of, so say there's $100. Oh, I'm just using a square, like an easy number for us here. Say there's $100
Paid in sales tax.
in local option
Yeah.
tax, right? And it's just going to one local option tax municipality. then $5.96 of that $100 would come off. And then we have what, $94.04. Of that $94.04, 30% goes to pilot, 70% goes to the municipality. Under this proposal, 75% would go to the municipality.
I'm clear on that. I'm just not clear on, is the return calculated per week, per month? When does a business send you the return?
It depends on the amount of money that they need to remit in taxes. So it's either monthly, quarterly. It depends. Even we have, I forget what the term is for like sales and use tax when it's periodical for like periodical payments. But it's typically either monthly or quarterly. That's where most of the revenues come from.
Okay.
So a retailer that has multiple locations would remit irrespective of whether the towns in which they operate both have LLTs?
So they need to account for, so say there's a retailer that has shops in 2 towns that have local option tax, Berlin and Montpelier.
Okay.
They would need to break out their sales that they're in Montpelier and in Berlin.
Okay.
Separately. And where things get complex is the non-brick and mortar shops, right, that are shipping into those different areas, breaking that out across, especially when they're working with large accounting firms that aren't based in Vermont. If we don't have, we have these digital boundary files to help them, but even then, there's a bit of confusion. And frankly, trying to get someone on the phone at some of these businesses when they're collecting and remitting, but maybe they're collecting and remitting for the wrong municipality, as might happen in a place like Essex Junction. That
Okay.
And the other challenge has not just been the store shipping in, but when you have like your point of sale system is a big national point of
Sure.
sale system and it just automatically updates that stuff. That's where I actually ran into more problems.
Yeah, and so we have folks in our taxpayer services division and compliance divisions consistently working with these different point of sale companies, different accounting firms, different corporate headquarters to try and get this right. It's a lot of work. It's become an increasingly amount of work in recent years.
So you're advocating the fact that you earn every penny of that 2.2 million that it, 1.2 million cost to administer.
Yeah.
Any other questions for Mr. Stein?
I do have a request.
Sure.
So
Just one.
We would love to see from an administrative perspective, the funding split, the effective date shift from, so first of all, 75-25, administration's fine with that. Would love to see the effective date. This is a tax department request in particular, shift from 7/1 to 10/1, because this needs to be coded into our system. And then we need to make sure that this is working for all of the different local. Section 12.
Okay.
With like section 12, if there could be a new subsection in the effective dates, because right now there's a catch-all language that everything
July.
it's July 1, right? So, and I can send you language on this. We'd love it to say section 12 local option tax amount paid to municipality shall take effect on October 1, 2025.
Okay.
Because that will give us the time needed to test it and make sure that we get this right.
Okay.
So section 12 only effective.
It doesn't need to be section 11 that also deals with, that's just the change in the percentage. That can
Yes, that
stay.
can stay.
Okay.
But section 12 effective 10/1.
And is there no section 13?
It seems like every day that goes by, we get 2 or 3 people coming in saying, oh, by the way, if you could just do this. I'm hoping that we get this out like tomorrow or the next day at the latest,
Understandable.
but I appreciate what you're saying.
Yeah, and we've had some situations where, we want to comply with the law to the best of our ability, but we've had some bills come out that give us like less than a month and we can't pull that off.
Okay.
Well, just shows you the high regard we have for tax and their abilities.
Well, I appreciate that. It's a talented team, I will say that.
Okay.
All right.
Andrew, thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
It's good to see you.
It's
It's long
good to
to see you.
I know.
So we
Amazing,
will,
work next door, never seen.
I know.
we'll move from the financial aspects of 397 to the dam aspects. Senator Watson is joining us.
Senator Parson does like to talk about dams.
Yep,
I'm very interested.
she's gonna get that section of the bill to report.
She better.
Yeah.
So, have you familiarized yourself with 2.1?
I believe so, yeah.
Okay. Because there is a piece of that that we did change.
Yes, I saw that, which is great.
So remind us in this new version, what section?
I believe it is section 9,
Section.
Section 8.
8,
A section.
the dam
A,
project.
dams.
Okay,
Yeah, well, thank you, Mr. Chair.
sure.
So I did send an email to the committee with some comments from the Senate Natural Resources and Energy Committee, because we did get a drive-by of this language. And so I just want to highlight some of the things that you mentioned in there. So the first, and I didn't, correct me if I am wrong about this, but I didn't see change to this in this draft 2.1. The first comment was about the timing of the necessary drawdown, or and particularly with the anticipation of a flood, right? Like this is the chapter about the emergency powers of the governor,
Mhm.
which presumably would take effect if there is a declared emergency and after it has already happened. But if you're going to have a drawdown, that needs to happen in anticipation.
Right.
And so,
I think if you look at
Okay.
page 6, I didn't mean to interrupt.
that's okay. No.
Page 6.
Yep.
Lines 9, 10, 11.
Yes.
In anticipation of a flood event.
So the comment that we had was a flood event that is likely to cause substantial damage as determined by who. And it could be fair to say that the person who makes that determination is also the Secretary of Natural Resources or designee, but that the way we were reading that that the consultation of Secretary of Natural Resources was about authorizing ANR to waive the permits.
Mhm.
So are they also the ones making the determination that there's a flood event to likely cause substantial damage? Maybe that is the same, but it seemed like it was at least worth raising that as a question.
Yeah, that's, I think, a good clarifying.
Senator Middleski.
I wonder if, I understand certainly the role that ANR plays in here, but I wonder if Vermont Emergency Management is actually the one to determine if it's a flooding event likely to cause significant damage.
Yeah.
And if there needs to be a collaboration there.
Or just straight VEM does the call.
Well, I think VAM does the call and then would let maybe ANR know, like, hey, here's the places where so they can do the dam work.
Yeah, and we did not have a position about who ought to be the one to make that call, that there's a flooding event imminent. But so whoever you decide is the right party, fair enough, as long as it's clear
Okay.
who should make that call.
We can have Tucker adjust that language, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, and I'd love to just confirm that with Eric, but my understanding is they're the ones tracking the weather patterns, not ANR.
True.
And I don't know, that's a good question.
Right, ANR's got the dam knowledge and the
Yeah.
water quality knowledge, but it is VAM.
It's VEM was tracking the
Who's fault?
weather. And you'd need at least sort of like a week to be able to inform all these dam owners. I mean, right?
I don't know what the.
You need time to be able to accomplish.
Well,
that.
that's a good question. We did not discuss
The
the.
time, that's what I thought you were gonna talk about, because I wrote down your concern was time.
Mhm.
And the time frame is important because to be able to communicate and effectively act on it.
Mhm.
So they need to have a plan in place for
Mhm.
when this may happen, but then they need they need some time to actually affect it.
The
Well,
problem with, in my view, with zeroing in on the time needed. Each event
It's gonna be.
is probably going to require a different timeline. I mean, if it starts raining today and we are told by the National Weather Service it's not gonna stop for 10 days, you could probably be pretty well assured we're gonna have issues. If it rains like heck for a day and then stops, so I think each individual event has to sort of lay out its own timeline. I would not wanna necessarily encourage us to put a, in
I agree.
say 2 hours or anything else.
But maybe something with enough time to actually let them.
Well, and
does.
so to complicate that, every dam, the rate, maybe you heard this from Mr. Green, who I mentioned is here, but the rate at which you draw down water from a dam matters. Right, like some of them would not essentially be able to withstand a rapid drawdown. You could actually damage the infrastructure. So it, depending on how much warning you have, that may affect how much or what how much water is drawn down, or the rate at which it is drawn down. And so all of those are dynamic, I think, that need to be flexible to respond to a particular dam's plan, which I will just say, sorry, if I'm interrupting, I feel like. Which I would also just say, I'm really grateful that there are criteria in here that there's the existence of a plan, or the need to have a plan is in here. I think that is really excellent. So really grateful for that, just in general. Happy to keep going with the second suggestion.
Let me see if Larry has.
Yeah, when we got the testimony last week, when we were talking to these people about it, they said that every dam, the gentleman from wherever he was from.
Dan Green.
Yeah,
Ben.
he said that every dam has a policy already set on this.
I don't believe that that's-
Yeah, he said
so.
he said that they have plans all set.
So the FERC regulated dams would have a drawdown plan, but not, my understanding anyway is that this would be true for all dams.
Yeah.
But
We can clarify that with him.
Yeah, because I could have swore he said that.
So that's, I think, what he's asking here is an everyday.
Yeah, I think the federal ones have to, but I
The
think
federal
they're
one.
not quite as regulations in our regulations.
But
They-
I think
they
it was the
don't
Green
follow
Mountain,
Dam state rule, I don't know.
it was the,
Green Mountain.
Green Mountain Power, all their dams had plans set.
Right, but they're for regular.
So that's a FERC dam. If they generate electricity.
Yeah.
They have to have all sorts of higher tier regulations than
Oh, yeah,
regular dams.
because you gotta have it on the Connecticut River, right? You got the-
You got it. Yep. But then there's also, we heard about our lovely US Army Corps dams as well, which can have there's like 3 or 4 different types of dam regulation structures.
Aren't they for regulated?
I don't know.
Are
If they don't generate electricity, I don't think you're required.
Only electric generating ones are for.
Only energy generating.
Federal Energy Regulatory Commission for.
Awesome.
They're the big one, Walls River too.
Okay, Senator Watson?
Yes. So, well, that was going to be my second point. One of the comments that came from Senator Hardy, sort of as we were wrapping up discussion on this, was about a question on, even in the state of emergency, can the governor waive a federal permit? And
Yes.
so we were unclear that the governor would have that ability. And so there's language in here, which I appreciate, which is on page 6, line 15, which actually power. But so the secretary or does me, to the extent feasible, consult with the applicable dam owners for federally licensed sites. So appreciate that, particularly that it says to the extent feasible. And this is where I think there's a little bit of non-clarity. There's a little bit of ambiguity as to what the governor may be allowed to do, which leads me actually to my third suggestion. This did not come from the committee, but would just flag that as a part of the Flood Safety Act that we passed last year, which is Act 121, we did create a dam task force. And particularly because there's some ambiguity here as to whether federal dams can have their permits waived. And, you know, I think there are some questions about, you know, is this the right list of criteria? Should there be additions? There's a reference to a refill plan in the criteria. What does that look like? What is you know, might be the criteria for a refill plan? There's questions about, you know, should this live in this chapter, or should the plan live in chapter 43, which is about non-FERC regulated dams. I would recommend that as a part of this somewhere, perhaps in concession law, that you include asking this dam task force to take a look at this language and see if they have any recommendations for adjustments, because they're still in play. They have a report due back, I believe, this December, and so I think this is something that they could potentially also take a look at as a part of their work to see if they have any recommendations for changes to make particularly the federal aspect of this a little.
Yeah, we should totally do that.
And put it in statute?
Well, if you're gonna, I would leave that to legislative council as to where to put that. Oh, I'm sorry. Are you wondering about the dam safety charge?
Yeah.
Yeah, if we're asking this task force to take a look at this language and see if they have any recommendations, my impression would be that would be language that would be for session law, since that's a time limited thing that, you know, once the report is out, it'll go away. So I don't know that it needs to be in statute particularly, but
Right, but the request, the plans, the drawdowns and the refills will be ongoing, so it'd be great to have the task force weigh in.
yeah. And
All of that, including whether we can ask whether the governor is able to
Free out
waive
federal.
a
Right.
federal permit.
yeah, and you know, I think having the dam task force take a look at this language, I think is important anyway. But also useful to have the language that you're looking at here in place in the interim, in case there were any events this summer, let's say. Let's hope that it's not the case, but sort of to have this as the default, in case either they don't have any recommendations or, you know, we have an event before they're able to get back to us.
Well, it would appear we won't be voting this out today
Here.
or tomorrow, maybe. So
Oh, dear.
I would like to get it out this week. I really would, because there's TIF considerations here. It's got to go across the hall. And I know Senate Finance is completely backed up with, well, the ed bill for one thing, and then there's a ton of other bills that are still hanging in there. So assuming we only have, as I hope, 2.5 weeks left, we need to probably get this moving as quickly as we can. So did you have any other?
Nope, that was it. And I just also want to thank you again as former mayor of Montpelier, current President Barry, and significantly impacted by flooding events. Just really grateful that you all were taking this up. So
Let me just ask.
Building on your good work from last.
yes.
I got this question, or 2 questions from Tucker Anderson. For the dam drawdown section, Senator Clarkson raised concerns about whether the plans should address potential economic impacts of the drawdown. Do you have any direction on whether I should add something to this section? I don't have any strong feelings about that. I don't know what you could
It
say.
wasn't economic impact on drawdowns. The impact is on when they're breached,
Flooding, yeah.
on the damage, that if they aren't managed. So, you know, it's only one of the reasons to do this is that the consequences of you're not managing it well are huge. I mean, if a dam is breached, but I don't think we need it here.
I don't either.
I don't think we need it here.
There are some dam safety rules that have been in the works for some time and they have been delayed a couple of times, as I understand it. And so we're hopeful that they'll be able to get those in place soon. And there's
Might they be in place after we have the task force's recommendations so that it's all united at one moment, i.e. next session?
I have to go back and look at when those dates are, because I don't recall, but this task force was not looking, they were specifically looking at the emergency operations plans and what should be done with them, like how that information should be distributed and live with other basically emergency service providers. So it was not necessarily connected with these other regulations, just about dam safety in general.
Still, is it an LCAR currently, the rules?
I don't believe so. Oh, no.
So two other things. Tucker says, I have removed sections of this bill in order to conform to the amendment of the COC, the Committee of Conference report for the budget. I don't know if we remember, but there was duplicative language both in this bill and in the budget that if they both passed could have created some issues. So he has removed that from this bill and it went into the committee of conference report of the budget. So that part we're all set.
That's the grand list stabilization
I
language.
believe so.
Okay, so it is still happening. It's just not happening. here.
Correct.
Okay.
And then the final one, and this was something that we talked a little bit about, for the APA section, incorporated federal regulations, members of the committee discussed whether the prospective repeal of this section should be moved to January 31st, 2029. Is this something that you would like me to do? And I wrote back and said, I don't really have a strong feeling one way or another, but I think they ought to be in alignment. If we've got a provision in here, and I'll find it here in a minute.
Yeah.
No, maybe I won't find it in a minute. I know what I'm trying to say, though. Senator Watson had offered to give us language that put it in this bill that basically said that the federal government changes the rules.
Section 19.
Section 19, thank you.
Hey, there you go.
So any federal regulation incorporated by reference into a Vermont rule, blah, 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 shall continue in effect as a state rule till January 1st, 2028. And we had talked about making it January 31st, 2029. But in the interim, I don't know where that leaves us. Why wouldn't we want those two dates to be in alignment with each other? I don't understand why we would want to change the prospective repeal.
Wait, can I just ask what,
Sure.
I think I'm trying to follow what your question is. I think what I understand this to be is that we are trying to make sure if the feds backslide on important stuff, that we have the longest horizon of time, that we still maintain our goals for.
Yes, you and I talked about
We
this.
did.
Yeah.
This has to be 29. This has to change to 29. Ann and I talked about this.
You mean
I
here?
Yes.
Oh, now I understand.
It
I
has-
thought we were talking about two different dates and I'm thinking,
No,
what are we doing?
I caught this.
Okay,
I feel good about this.
Wow.
well, congratulations and
So
Like
if we're trying to
admiration for you.
protect ourselves from this administration, we have to make it January 29.
uh,
Because if you make it 28, they have another whole year to affect things.
okay. I'm fine with changing that date.
There we go.
And Ms.
Very good. And we do have some similar language in our Fish and Wildlife Technical Corrections bill. I think that's in there. So if you all are going to be passing this, well, we can just talk about whether or not we should or
Put it in both or just take one out.
exactly, or just
Yeah.
take one out. And
Okay.
it's particularly if it matches, then it probably doesn't hurt, but let's just be in touch about that.
Okay.
Okay.
Anything else for Senator Watson?
I just wanted to say,
Yes.
thank you so much for bringing these different sections, and it sounds like your whole committee reviewed it.
Yes.
But you also have are you doing anything related to flooding in other bills? That we should be,
I can't think of anything at the moment.
So this is our whole,
This is the flood. This is what's happening in flooding.
great, thank you.
Well,
Okay,
Moving.
Great.
thank you, Senator
Thank
Watt.
you. Appreciate it.
thank you so much for your damn help. And so I think we
Your
have,
dance one.
We have 2 or 3 changes we need to.
well, we need to verify as determined by you.
Right, I wrote that one down.
Right.
Who
And,
decides, VEM question mark,
yeah,
and then Dam Safety Task Force put
Yeah.
in session law to make recommendations on preemption of federal law.
correct.
So what else? Change the date of the,
And the refill
Section
plan,
19.
what are we doing about a refill plan?
well, that's
Maybe we should leave that with the dam task force.
already here, right?
And
There's a refill plan if unavailable to achieve during storm event. It's on page 7, line 12.
okay, I'm sorry.
That's okay.
That's right, there it is.
Okay. And then the final one would be on section
So that's part of the criteria.
19 to change the rule that's would stay in effect till January 1st, 2029.
Yeah.
Okay, so those are the ones to end the effective date of the tax in section 12, move it to October 1st.
Right.
Okay. So we're gonna have to have a new, probably a 3.1 or a 2.2 on this, and I don't know when we're gonna be able to vote it out. My plan again was divided into 5 reporters. Each of us will take a section and report on the floor and be ready for any questions that might come up, I guess.
I volunteered you to talk about local option taxes because I love them so much.
Senator, you have you literally read my mind. I was about to ask if I could request an inspection.
Well, I'll tell you what. Well, we have, because we're gonna vote the Berry Town Charter, and then at 3, we're gonna have the youth council. I grabbed the first section just because normally the chair would start it.
Yep.
So I'm gonna go, and I don't know whether this is now we get different page numbers, because the part was taken out of this. But I'm gonna do section 1, section 2, section 3, section 4, section 5, and section 6.
Okay,
And then whoever wants to be number 2,
I'm happy to be number 2, because then that
It's
would be,
dams.
is that the,
well, no, section 7 isn't,
But section 8 begins dam.
yes, I'm happy to take.
so, okay, so you would do section 7, section 8, section 9.
Section 9 begins local option
No,
taxes.
local option tax.
No,
So then I yield to the,
you sit down and you look over at me, and then I'm happy
And I
to
give her a
do.
kick and she stands up.
Whoop. And then I'm happy to do all of that up until section.
So that's section 9,
I'm happy to do through section.
9 through 11, is that?
I'm happy to do.
No, it's just section 9, and then section 10 is flood
Flooding
abatement
abatement.
program. So do you want to do that as well?
Yeah, I'm happy. I kind of like when everyone does. I don't super love when everyone so I'm happy to just do whatever sections and same all at
Oh,
one time.
it keeps going with local option tax.
yeah,
I'm sorry.
section 11.
So section,
It's,
it's through 11.
no, it's 12 and 13 as well.
Oh,
And 14.
I'm happy to end at 15, so I'm happy to do
Okay.
that through 15.
All right, and then, number 4 would be, if this is just definitionally
technical
changed,
correction.
yeah.
Oh, this does have around, this is, oh no, I guess it doesn't.
No, it's just tax. Sections
It's the language stuff.
16 through 19 is just technical corrections.
Yeah, I'm happy to close
Or
it out.
15 through 19.
So, well, then we're at the end of the bill.
Yes, there's one.
So why don't you
Section-
close that? Why don't you take the last?
Well, I want Larry to do part, and I want
Oh,
Brian
okay,
to do
great. Oh, great.
part.
Well, we have section 16 through sections 23.
Okay, so,
At 16 through 19 are just technical corrections.
15.
Right.
So 16.
if Larry wanted to do 15 and 16,
Oh, I thought I had Becca doing through till 15, but it's just through 14.
yeah, because, well, see, I've got the 2.1 draft, you might still have the other one.
I have 2.1.
Okay,
15, 16, 17, 18, and 19 are all technical.
well, why don't I just between you and Senator Hart, figure out which section you want to do, Johnny, and then whoever
Brian,
it
your
is, take it all the way through the 23rd.
Your sections 1 through 6, I'm set, AHC is sections 7 and 8. Becca is
9 through 14.
And then-
sections 9 through 14, and then
15.
And then 2021 look to both be TIF districts.
Oh, that would be a good time to change the
And
board.
22 is the repeal of something.
Okay,
And then 23 is, I'm happy to do 20 through the end,
20 through
which is the
23.
two TIF districts, the repeal and the effective dates.
So Larry would do 15 through 19.
Take it slow.
Okay.
I'll bring us home.
Okay, so we get a break before the next group, which is the, youth council. I'd like to move out the town of Barry charter. This is one that we took testimony from, Representative McFawn and I believe Tucker, and that's the only witnesses we had, which is fine. This is the bill that will, in essence, do away with the position of auditor, if I'm remembering correctly, for the town of Barry. So
So, Mr. Chair, I would move that we pass out H 505 favorably.
Okay.
No amendment.
No.
Would it even be saying like we concur with the House? Is it fifth?
yes,
Well, we don't have to concur, we just pass it as they send it over.
Great.
Okay,
Okay, so the clerk can call the roll?
yes, Senator Clarkson,
yes.
Senator Hart, yes. Senator Borowski,
The whole.
Behosky,
Yeah, you got it.
Oh,
Yay.
Steve.
yay?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
The only person that says yay is Jeff, I'm the guy next to you guys. Senator White
Yes.
and Senator Colmore.
Yes. And Larry, you will report this if you would.
Yes, I will.
I have from Tina Lund, who's the Barry Town Clerk, the vote totals,
Oh, yeah.
which will help in your report. I wouldn't necessarily go all the way through the, there's 4 categories of votes. I would just say the yeas and the nays, not the, not the others.
Yeah.
Particularly even our election. bill.
Do I give this back to you?
Yes.
Yeah. And Jillian has a clean copy of the bill. And then you'll want to see when Melissa pokes her head in, you can say, yes, we have a bill for you. Is this the one with the signature? No. I don't know. She'll bring back the one with the signature.
Okay.
Okay, so let's take a